Watercolor Techniques today. But first, we're gonna have to make a border on this paper. And by doing that, we're gonna do a 1-inch border all the way around. And so you're gonna measure from here. You never wanna start here because you don't know how much of this has been cut off. You don't know if this is the right length. You always wanna start from the 1. So we're gonna go here and do this. Alright, so after you have your border drawn, we're gonna draw 7 1-inch squares within your border space. Alright, so this is what your paper should look like afterwards. The first technique that we're going to go over is called wet on dry, and we're going to do it in this first box. So what you're going to do is load up this round brush with some water. So we're going to dip it in here, load it up with some water. And then I'm going to take it over here. And I'm going to use this green color. Actually, I want to use this color. This like turquoise, this green color over here. So I want to use that one. And so you're going to load up your brush with this color. And so it's okay to use this paint that's a little dry. All you do is add a little bit more water to it, so you get some pigment, and you just want to put a little bit on there. All right, and what you're going to want to do is just take it through here and put it on the dry paper. So for this, your paper is going to be pretty dry. And you can see that with this technique, you can kind of control where your pigment is going a little bit better, and you can push it around the surface. But you're gonna want, this is something that you'd want to use on completely dry paper. And obviously with watercolor, you're gonna have issues where some spots might be lighter than you want them to, but that's just the nature of watercolor. And the best thing that you could do after that is just go and put more pigment over it if it's not quite what you want. Alright, and so I'm just gonna real quickly, if I can find my pencil, write what I just did on top of that. And again, this technique is called wet on dry. The next technique that I want to show y'all is this one. It's called dry on wet. So what you're gonna do is take some clean water. So this water is fairly clean from this bowl over here. And we're gonna take this round brush again, and we're gonna fill this all up with water. I'm gonna fill the square up with water. And so then you're gonna want to take some paint kind of straight out of the tube. You're not gonna want to do it straight out of the tube. You're just gonna want a little bit straight out of the tube. So this is what it's gonna look like when you push it out of the tube, and that will go a very long way. And so what you're gonna want to do is take a very tiny amount of this. So like maybe that much. That is about how much you should be using. All right. And then you're gonna wait till this it's gonna look a little shiny right now, but what you wanna do is kind of wait till it's not as shiny. But for sake of time purposes, I'm gonna show you, it'll pretty much do the same thing. So you're just gonna kind of dab it on here. And then it's always better to start off with less pigment and then build up afterwards. So say you don't quite have the darkness of the color you want here. The best thing that you could do would be to wait for this to dry and do this all over again and just add more pigment instead of making it too dark at the beginning and then you can't go back. And so say you wanted a more saturated color than this yellow right here, I would say just wait for it to dry, and then after it dries you can add more color on top. Alright, then I lost my pencil. Alright, and again, that one was called dry on wet. Alright, so the next one that we're gonna do is called wet on wet. So we're gonna start off the same way. So we're gonna get the paper right here, and we're gonna get some water in our brush, and we're gonna flood the paper with water. And so this whole square should be filled with water. Alright, and then I'm gonna come over here, and so the same yellow that we were using before, you see how it's still kind of globbed up like that? That's still dry paint, or more dry than usual. So what you're gonna do is keep adding water to this area. And you don't want to have dry paint in there, so you're gonna try to knock it off on the side. But you're gonna come in here, and there should be a puddle of yellow. I don't know if you can see that, but there's gonna be a puddle of yellow pigment. And then you load your brush up, and your brush should look something like that. I mean, maybe not so much pigment, but it should look something pretty close to there. And then you're just gonna, as I said before, you kind of wanted to wait till the shine goes away, but that's okay. We can do it. But you're just gonna kind of put the paint in there, and you should kind of just see it disperse. You notice that this time this is kind of a little bit darker, it's a little bit more saturated of a color. Alright, and then always afterwards, after you use your brush, if you're going to change pigments, you need to do this and change the color. Alright, again, that technique was called wet on wet. So we're going to label all of our techniques as we do them so we can remember them later. And there's a space for you here if you want to write down notes about each one, just so you can remember how to do them. But for this technique, it's another wet on wet technique, and what you're gonna do is take, you're gonna first apply clean water to the surface, and so I'll do that real fast. And then after that, I'm gonna take that same yellow that we've been using and apply a wash of it to the surface. So exactly what we had been doing with wet on wet. Alright. That's what that should look like. And now there is more to this technique. So after, we're gonna have to wait and let this dry for a little bit. But after this dries, and you can kind of see, can't see pigment anymore on it. Well, you can't see, it's not shiny anymore. You can see the pigment obviously, but it's not gonna be shiny anymore. You're gonna put a lot of paint on the tip of the round brush, and then you're gonna poke dots in it. And so those dots should create blooms. And that will make more sense when I show you what I mean. After it dries. And so we gotta wait for it to dry a little bit. So I'm gonna go to the next technique that I want to teach you, and then we'll come back. The next one that I want to teach you is how to do a flat wash. Okay, so for this, you're gonna want to make your paper a little damp. And so you're gonna flood this little thing right here again. But you don't want to flood it too much, you just want it to be damp. And ideally, we would wait for this to also dry a little bit, and so it's just a little damp. And then I'm gonna use red this time because I like red, and we can switch it up. It's a little orange, maybe it'll look orange at all. So what you're gonna do is, so starting with the color that you start with, so what you're gonna do is you're never gonna put more pigment on this for this one. You're gonna start from the top. You're gonna do lines, and they should overlap. And then you're gonna just keep pulling the pigment down so it kind of creates one flat wash at the end. So it should all be about the same saturation throughout. And I mean, again, the reason this may not necessarily look completely like the same saturation is strictly because I didn't wait for the water to soak into the paper as much as I should have, but ideally you're gonna want to do that. And so like you can kind of pretty much see this is all pretty much the same saturation. So I'll zoom in on it a little bit, you'll see. But again, that's called a flat wash. Now that this over here has dried a little bit more, we're gonna go back to charging. And so what I want to do is use this red color. And so you want a whole lot of paint on this. And what you're gonna do is just do this, and it should create blooms. The next thing that we're gonna do is a gradated wash. The first thing that you wanna do is load up your brush with lots of paint and water. So a lot of paint and a lot of water right here. We get a lot of paint. Get a lot of paint, go over here. So as you can see, lots of paint and water. Right there. That's what that's gonna look like. And then we're gonna come over here. And we're going to place the brush on the paper and pause. And then we're going to move the brush back and forth in a slow, controlled motion and overlap every previous stroke. So you're not going to charge your brush again, you're just going to keep going. And this should create a gradient as you continue to bring it down. And so every once in a while, you're going to want to stop and take a little bit of paint out of the brush, so by dumping it in there, and then you're just going to go right on to what you're doing before. That's what I'm doing. As you can see, gradation starts to happen as you bring it down. Maybe take a little bit more out. So that is called a gradated wash. And the next thing that I'd like to teach you is called a gradated color wash. And so what's going to end up happening in this is that you're going to move from one color to another color as you paint. And so what you want to do for this is start off with a little bit of color on your brush. And so let's start off with a little red this time. Let's try a little bit more red. Alright, so what you're going to do is you're going to keep going in lines and overlap those lines as you go, just like we did in the last gradated wash. The difference between this is that we will gradually be adding the other color to what we were doing. So. So as you can see, it got a little bit more yellow as it went down. Maybe sometimes it doesn't quite work out right, so you gotta add a little bit more of that red pigment at the top or different pigment so it looks more gradual. But again, that is a gradated color wash. The next thing that we're going to do is it's called lifting. So it's kind of like erasing. It's the closest thing to erasing the watercolor. And so what you're going to want to do is put a flat wash down like we did before. And if you remember what we did with the flat wash, we'll wait for it to dry a little bit. And then just a reminder on how to do a flat wash since we're doing it again. We're gonna load the brush up with paint and water. So this time I'm gonna use that greenish turquoise color from the beginning. And then we're gonna wait for it to dry a little bit longer. What you're gonna do is just like we did before. You're gonna go in lines. You're going to bring the color down. And you want the color to be even throughout. So that's pretty even. Alright, and then from there, we're going to make sure that you're gonna take the brush, you're gonna clean it off as much as possible, and you're gonna try to get all the excess moisture off. And best way to do that would be to use a towel and just dry it off. But then, as you can see, the brush is pretty dry. You're gonna take the brush in here, and you're gonna start lifting paint out of it. And so. Then every so once in a while, clean your brush again, dry it off, depending on how much paint you want to get out of it. And then as you can see, it's not necessarily erasing it, but it's getting as much of it out as possible. So Now that we're finished with all of our techniques, what we're gonna do is see that our border is white right now. By the end of this, I don't want the border to be white. I want you to use at least 3 of these techniques that I've presented to you on the border, and hopefully they look cool afterwards. And also, you've learned a little bit about watercolor.